solve a mystery. My name is Detective Ryan Chode, and I'm here to solve a mystery. We have a mystery, folks, and it's called The Shining. It's a movie that we watched, and I'm getting straight into the meat and potatoes here because this is my number one movie.
No cold open. This is a special occasion.
This is a special occasion. Yeah. This is our first number one, and I know nobody else numbered their list, but I did. And this is my favorite movie. This is my number one, and I have so many things to say about it. And I think we should just go ahead and kick into it. I know David had a few words to say about Stanley Kubrick and the beginning of his career.
I won't go into Stanley Kubrick too much because I know
not the beginning of his career, but like
a little bit of a primer for this, just
before The Shining.
Well, right before The Shining, which was released in 1980, he made Barry Lyndon. It's just 4 years before 1976, a movie I have not seen actually personally myself, but I hear very good things. That it is apparently
gorgeous,
a very beautiful movie. Yeah. But anyway, the movie was very expensive to make, as you can imagine. It was a costume period piece where he used NASA lenses to shoot the movie.
And candles.
Yeah. And use natural lighting, only candles.
Yeah.
Well, it was natural lighting, and then at night he was like candles.
Yeah. So like in film, when we like light things, there are two measurements to determine the intensity of light. You can use just f-stops. You can just use f-stops, or you can use foot candles, and that determines the brightness. It's in relation to like how many feet away from a candle, how bright it would be. Yeah. And so, unironically, my man's out here using real foot candles for that fucking movie. Go ahead.
And they had to use NASA lenses because it wouldn't show up.
It wouldn't fucking show up otherwise. Yeah, it's too dark.
There's like a million candles.
Oh yeah. Also, apparently the set would be like 30 degrees hotter than it normally would because it's just so. Go look up that movie. There are scenes that are at night indoors. It is like there are roaring fires all around people. There are so many candles. It is like the set is this close to catching. Go ahead, David. Sorry, just a quick aside.
Barry Lyndon is a very odd movie. At least on the production side, the movie itself, from what I hear, is very, very dry. But I'm excited to watch it. But
every frame of painting is what's said about a lot of movies, but that's where it like originated. Was like that movie. Literally, he looked at a bunch of like Renaissance paintings and he went, "What if that? But every frame.
Yeah.
What if I did that every frame?" There are singular frames you can Google if you Google Barry Lyndon, and you'll dead ass think it's a painting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's insanity.
And the movie was extremely expensive to make. Comes out and it doesn't do very well at the box office. And yeah, a lot of critics like it, but the common complaint is that it's very dry. And so he kind of goes into a bit of a funk, and he's like, all right, well, so I need to make something that's a bit more commercially accessible. I want to do something that, is actually kind of popular. Because he looked at his, no doubt, the career of his best friend at the time, Steven Spielberg.
Yeah.
And he was making these huge populist entertainment films that were breaking all these records in the box office. And he probably saw he wanted to make his version of maybe something kind of like that. And so then he makes The Shining, which he gets after he famously apparently just picked up a bunch of horror novels, and like he would like get a couple chapters into it and just throw it against the wall if he didn't like it.
Yeah, well, it was... He wanted to make a horror movie because he thought horror was, especially in the 80s, was very commercially viable. And so he had his assistants bringing him stacks and stacks of horror novels, and he would read the first few pages and he would throw them at a wall. And there's a famous story of his assistant at the time who noticed that she hadn't heard a thud for a minute, and she came in and he was reading The Shining. And he was very engrossed by the book, and he legitimately liked the book and was... felt it was like had universal themes. I haven't read it. I don't know.
I actually have.
I have, yeah.
I read a little bit of it in elementary school and I got bored.
I know the general differences. I know how it's different, but I understand that it's like a good piece. And it's
it's one of those things that like The Shining for many years was considered like unfilmable, and then this movie came out and it makes sense. It's nothing. It's right. It uses the core themes, but it's not the same really at all.
Yeah, and
which it's better for it. It's better for it.
That's the first thing I want to go ahead and get out of the way. which is Stephen King and his relationship with this movie. He hates it. He fucking hates
Yeah.
it. He directed his own version of The Shining, which was a TV movie, and it sucks ass.
It was like a 5-hour TV movie. It was like technically a miniseries, but there's been edited all into one. Yeah.
Yeah, and it I don't know. I haven't seen it, but I've seen shit from it.
I've
it
seen
looks
it.
like Free Jack, but bad.
Before I watched actually watched The Shining, I did watch that as a kid, and I liked it because my mom liked that one, and so I watched that one. My dad's like, "What is this garbage? Here you go," and he made me watch the actual Shining, and of course, I fell in love instantly. But there are things that I really like from the Stephen King Shining adaptation. First off, the lead is it's the dude from Wings. I can't remember his name. It's the dude who's in the sitcom Wings, if anyone remembers. Not John Daly, the guy who plays Superman, the other guy from Wings. And he gives an amazing performance as Jack Torrance. I think overall, like his relationship with his family, better, which makes sense. It's like 5 hours long, so it kind of goes more into it. I think that the Wendy in that is a bit underrated as well. And I think that some of the things that are left on the cutting room floor in the Kubrick version from the original, it is a shame that it's missing. And I do think some of it, like, it's really helped by being back in it. Now, I think the living snake fire hose needs to be gone. I think the hedges coming to life and coming after them, good, it's gone. It's corny. Now, it's something that's scary when you read it. It's like, but you visualize it and it's fucking dumb.
And I like Stanley Kubrick liked the book. Like, he thought all these other horror novels he read were trash, and this one hooked him in. And he's talked about it. Like, there's a little blurb you can read where he's like, "It has universal themes, and why wouldn't you want to tell a story with universal themes? It has messaging, And he just says basically what he says about every other book that he's adapted. Or generally, and he liked it. It was a good book. He thought it was a story worth telling. So he did not hate Stephen King.
No, that's a mythologized, like many things surrounding this in Kubrick. It's mythologized. That's not really.
Stephen King definitely thinks Stanley Kubrick hates him.
Well, and it's in part of that.
There's a reason for that.
Yeah, part of it is like what people said. B, Stanley Kubrick's version is a lot more like beloved than the original, and that's got to sting a lot for someone like Stephen King because. For those who don't know, The Shining is one of his like works that is the most personal to him. Yeah. Because he was abused by an alcoholic father, and then he wrote the book because by the time he became a father, he had himself already been an alcoholic and a coke addict, and he had that realization of, oh my God, I'm my dad and I'm doing this to my kids, what he did to me, except maybe not intentionally, like it seemed his father was malicious, which is kind of what happens in both versions. Right. So it's very personal and it makes sense. It's
a fair read that Stanley Kubrick read The Shining and he got to the part where Danny sees Jack's ghost and he's like, and he forgives him and he's like, this is bullshit. You don't this is coming from you as the alcoholic.
Yeah, exactly.
Dad, writing about your son. You don't get to decide that your son forgives you when your son, throughout the course of the story, how it plays out, sees you as the bad guy. Like, you are the villain here. You are not good. And I think that is, and I don't think that was a critique at Stephen King. I think that was a critique at the way he wrote the book.
He was a little too close to it. He couldn't see the forest for his trees, almost,
And I think that is what comes down to
He was stuck in the labyrinth out in front of the Overlook Hotel.
It's less a critique of Stephen King, and it's more of a critique of the attitude Stephen King went into writing The Shining.
Yeah, he was. I mean, it's redemptive to the alcoholic character. I mean, by the end of in the book, okay, so in the movie, it's almost like they're going to go with it. They talk about the furnace a few times, but it never really comes back. It's just like, oh, it's part of upkeep. In the book and in the TV movie, it is very important that he maintain the furnace because either the whole place freezes over and is ruined, or it fucking explodes and everyone dies and the burning blows up. And so the end of the movie is like the end of the book, he like sets it to explode, but in the last second he has a moment of clarity and realizes, and so he goes back to try to shut it off. And so it's kind of like he gets a redemption at the end, and then as you said, talking to his ghost, there's the redemption. And it's fair that Kubrick was like,
Yeah, and it's not that doesn't make it bad in The Shining the book. It's just Kubrick had a different when he was reading the book, he saw Jack as the bad guy.
Also, it's 2.5 hours of a movie already.
Yeah.
There's things you got to fucking cut.
Absolutely. And it's but he did cut some of the most important things from the book.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's a lot more setup for Jack's behavior and like his history of violence and his own personal history of like abuse. Because there's scenes where he like goes into the town, like before it freezes over, he goes into the town, like right outside of the, what's the name of the road? Sidewinder? Is that what it's called? Sidewinder? Like right out on the town, right on the outskirts. He goes to it and he's got like these weird fucking visions of his past, and it goes much more in depth with it. But and I think it's interesting.
To move away from the book a little bit and to move to another piece of side media that is still not The Shining is a documentary called Room 237, which is a fucking awesome documentary, but you should definitely watch it with an open mind.
Yeah,
not
ever since this documentary came out, and it's a very well made documentary, and it turns out to be very influential in its own way, much like The Shining. Because it's pretty much the prelude to a lot of these like YouTube film video essays you see now, especially the ones when the ones are just like have these absolute crackpot theories.
Source crackpot.
Yeah.
Room 237 starts with a lot of like really good film analysis, and it notices like they're bringing up how the sets change like within shots and how there are impossible rooms and like the office that they visit in the beginning,
which is all true.
Yeah,
like,
and
it's all
and that is absolutely part of the horror. But then the things that they go to from there, are
it's like any conspiracy theory where you're like almost with them, and then they say, and then the Jews did it all, and you're like, okay, well, calm down there, buddy.
And then the reptilians who are wearing human skin, like that's where you lose me.
There's a lot of takes in it that I think are fair in a degree, like. Yeah, it is kind of saying something about Native American genocide.
Yeah,
like, a little bit, but
it's not the main focus. Like, they mentioned it was on a Native American burial ground, and that they had to fight with the tribes
and
during
White Man's Burden.
And he mentions White Man's Burden, but it's like they fought the tribes off where they're building it. And then on top of that, when she's like, "Oh, is this like authentic Native American decor?" and he says something interesting where he says, yeah, this is Apache and Navajo, I believe. This is in Colorado. This is in Colorado. If I remember correctly, that's not where the Navajo and Apache are from, also, if I remember correctly.
There's the and this is something the Room 237 harps on a lot, is the jars and the way that things are positioned on the set. And it's like...
It's just more visually appealing is the big thing.
Is it true that Stanley Kubrick was anal about how everything was placed? Kinda, yeah. But also, was it like all deliberate in such a way
that everything has like super deep meaning? Yeah, that's. And I know I went on a rant a couple episodes ago about like everything has meaning, but which is true. Everything has some sort of meaning why you do it. However, the meaning doesn't have to be some deep philosophical idea.
It could be just that it's more visually stimulating.
Is that it fits more with like the ratio or like something. There is
or color,
something like that, which is part of why he did it. Also, did he choose those cans because there was a Native American brand? Absolutely. It's a comment on commercialism. But it's not.
Was one of them turned to the side to represent a specific idea that you can single out? No, absolutely not.
I think for the most part, what it is just he started off as a photographer, and so
exactly.
He knows how to compose a good image, and he knows exactly what.
And
he
it's
wants.
also, and we'll get into this later. But on The Shining, according to Angelica Houston, The Shining operated on 35 takes before anything was cut. That means anything before 35 was thrown away instantly. They shot that on film. All of that was
that's a lot of rolls of celluloid,
and
dude.
it's some of these scenes have very long takes. So 35 minimum. So was he going and after every take saying move that thing a little bit more?
He wants a difference. He wants something. If you're gonna do that many takes, especially if it's a scene where there's not a lot going on, which in the pantry, aside from near the end or aside from when he's talking, what's his name? Dick Halloran, yeah. When he's talking to him, it's like, those are the only two super important scenes in the pantry.
Yeah.
Everything else is, it's kind of just there. And so it's like, well, if you got to improve something every time, the background,
Right.
like fuck with the background a little bit.
That's actually what I think is the most fascinating about this Room 237 documentary is that, and because the movie is kind of it's kind of structured where like each person will have a different kind of reading on the movie.
Yeah.
And what's most consistent amongst all of these theories, despite how insane all of them are, like you get one that's about like how the most notorious one is how it's about The Shining is Stanley Kubrick's way of confessing that he faked the movie. And I'll get into that in a little bit. But like what I think is the most consistent thing among all of these stories is they'll get these extremely slim, very minor kind of things for evidence, like something kind of in the background, and then it's extremely minor. But then they'll use insane levels of projection onto Stanley Kubrick and who they think he was. Okay. Because Stanley Kubrick it sort of became propped up as like this mythical figure.
Yeah.
And I think it's because of movies like The Shining and Route 237. And I think it was because he was such an elusive guy.
Yeah.
He never did interviews. He never went to the premieres and never showed up at award shows or whatever. And so because of that, you can just pretty much project whatever you want to on him.
Yeah, he's a blank slate.
Yeah.
And one thing about those tiny details is it's my favorite thing from Route 237 is this idea that there's a Minotaur.
Oh
The
my
Shining.
God.
And this is after I watched Route 237, I think I watched The Shining like the next 5 times I watched it. I was looking for the Minotaur.
Just desperately
Yes,
trying to read the Minotaur in it.
They say that there's like a displacement of 2 shots as they fade together that shows you a Minotaur, and it's impossible to see.
Is the shot they're talking about the one where it's like Wendy and Danny in the maze, and it cuts to immediately behind Jack while he's walking in the lobby?
No, that's a real Minotaur shot. I'm talking about one that's earlier in the film.
Oh, okay, got you.
Yeah,
Apparently in a poster.
No, the poster is a real Minotaur shot too. That thing looks like a fucking Minotaur.
No, it doesn't.
It absolutely looks like a fucking Minotaur. And here's the thing. Yeah, it's ridiculous to assert that there's a Minotaur somewhere in The Shining, but there's a labyrinth.
Well,
and what is at the center? Who guards the labyrinth?
Yeah, and so like the thing I'll say about that, it's like the Minotaur, is it a thing? No, but would Kubrick maybe use a little bit of Minotaur imagery? That's still possible because it's like
it's a little bit of Minotaur.
Well, because if you have a labyrinth and you're doing stuff, you can do a little bit of the imagery because there are. I mean, where does Jack die?
In the labyrinth.
In the labyrinth. Who understands how the labyrinth works?
And he's carrying an axe.
And he's.
He's carrying an axe in the labyrinth. Minotaurs carry axes.
Oh, okay.
I will say, despite how crackpot a lot of these theories, I don't want to harp too much on this documentary because it's not what we're talking about. But I do feel like The Shining is forever kind of sort of connected to this documentary now, in a way that's inescapable.
Yeah.
But like, there was one of the theories in the movie that actually kind of did make me change a reading on the movie that I never actually had before. And it's one about how like Jack is sexually abusing Danny, because apparently there's a part in the hotel right before he's about to go in for the job interview where he's reading a magazine when Stuart Ullman come and finds him, and apparently if you look, it's a Playgirl magazine, and he's just reading that.
Yeah,
apparently I don't know, but it's very interesting.
So if you want to talk about that, like that's part of actually the book. Is that Jack Torrance was like molested.
Mm-hmm.
And so it doesn't imply in the book that he is molesting Danny.
Right.
It's just that he is perpetuating the cycle of abuse, but not directly the same way he was abused, but in another way.
Right. And they also show that with Danny, and there's a friend who lives in my mouth. Like that's a common thing that people will say. Like kids who will say when they don't really know what they've experienced. And the finger thing, that's also a common thing. But here's the thing. Danny has the Shining.
Yep. He's got the shine.
He can connect to his father's trauma in a way that no one else really can understand.
So a couple of things with that. I think that I think it's not that he's being sexually abused. I think he's just physically and emotionally abused. And I think a lot of it is either A, through the shine, he is able to like just kind of empathetically glom onto what his dad is going through and has gone through. And alternatively, I mean, The Shining, this entire movie is allegorical, and it's pretty apparent It's for abuse and the cycle of abuse and like mental illness and everything, which is why I think it's so funny that everyone has these like fucking crackpot ideas and everyone's like, I just don't know what The Shining's about. I'm like, it tells you a lot. It tells you all the time.
But it's about a lot of things.
Well, things can be about multiple things.
Right,
yeah, exactly.
And I think actually what David's saying is fair, especially when you look at a later scene where
he's holding him
and he's like rubbing his hair.
Yeah, it is a weird energy and it's understandable.
He's like, I just want you to have a good time.
Yeah, no,
I just want you to have a good time.
Well, exactly. But you can also see it as maybe he's not sexually abusing him, but he's reliving from the opposite angle what he went through, and stuff like that. Which yet again, that being in the source material, it would make sense that there are some whispers of it in the adaptation.
To move off of Room 237, because I agree with you. It's a lot of crackpot bullshit, and I think there's a lot of better shit to talk about. But one last thing that we need to get out of the way.
It's film theory before film theory. Go ahead, continue.
One final thing we need to get out of the way is the most infamous thing related to this movie, and that is the Shelley Duvall, some will say also Scatman Crothers, and their experiences working on the film, and Stanley Kubrick's alleged abuse of them on the film. And I want to just go ahead and get one thing out of the way. Scatman Crothers had nothing really but positive things about working on this movie. And the only person I can find who really had detailed accounts of what happened on the set of The Shining is Angelica Houston, who was not on the set of The Shining. She was just dating Jack Nicholson at the time. Yep. And I'm sure she does have a much better idea of it than any other person, but who's willing to go forward. But I haven't heard a lot of the other people who worked on this. I don't know if a lot of them are alive still.
Yeah. I mean, like, Shelley Duvall, like, didn't have a great time on it. And Kubrick is abusive as a director. That is a known thing about him. But I don't think that she experienced. People say that he thought she was the worst actor that had ever existed, and the only way that he could get a performance out of her is by abusing the shit out of her, and that is just not true.
That's not true. She was one of the.
He chose her. Yeah, because he thought she was perfect for the role. He thought she was a great actress.
He chose her. She was the first person picked. She knew before.
I think a part of it was that people said that the studio forced him to take her on.
Yeah,
which isn't true. Yeah.
She just said that she knew that she had the role before anybody else did, and I think people took that to mean that she knew that before Stanley Kubrick did, but I think she knew that because Stanley Kubrick.
He headhunted her.
The thing is Stanley Kubrick is he is claimed to have told the cast of The Shining to socially isolate Shelley Duvall and to essentially treat her like dog shit until she could have these heartbreaking moments of stress and anxiety on screen. And the goal of getting her to a state of stress and anxiety is true. That was the goal, but he wasn't telling people to socially isolate. He wasn't being mean to her. Before they started shooting, they had some kind of meeting. He met with all the cast, and he basically detailed how arduous the shoot was going to be. And he was like, this is going to be a commitment. And if you want to do it, you have to commit to it, but it's no shame if you don't want to do it. And everybody said they did it, and that matches up with what Shelley Duvall says later, because, if you just go off of the fucking Dr. Phil shit, fuck that guy.
But, fuck him.
Fuck that guy and his stupid fucking
He's
TV
a piece
show.
of shit, yeah.
But Shelley Duvall said later that, it was a very hard shoot. It was very arduous, but that it was something that she committed to and that she's kept to because she felt like she had made a commitment to it, and it was something that she wanted to see through to the end.
Well, I mean, you're doing 14-hour days. Yeah. It's little turnover.
Right. And she was proud of the experience.
Basically living on the site you're shooting at, too.
In the process. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't a hard time. Shelley Duvall wasn't ruined by The Shining. It was just a really bad year in her employment career. It
was just a hard shoot for everyone.
Yeah.
And as far as
for her specifically because she had to cry just constantly.
Nonstop. Well, as an actor, because a lot of people don't understand what it's like to be an actor, to get into that place is hard, and it's hard to live in that place for hours on end when you're filming a movie. And honestly, part of where the story of socially isolated so she can get the thing, it probably is what every actor requests directors to tell everyone, which is don't bother or talk to me while we're about to film and while we're filming, so I don't get out of my headspace.
Right.
There are very few actors who can actually legitimately give a great performance in and out.
Yeah.
It's an incredibly hard thing to do. Jack Nicholson is one of them. And that's part of why you hear the stories of like Jack Nicholson just talking about like football or with like Stanley Kubrick in between takes, and he'll do something really intense right after. That's because he's one of those people who is lucky enough that he can come in and out of a performance. But Shelley Duvall had to give much more intense, because like it's easy to be psychotic and angry and compared to distressed, like she had to be in crying, and it's exhausting.
Right, yeah.
And yet you don't want people talking to you while you're doing it because you've got to be in it.
Not to exonerate Stanley Kubrick either, because like he was to a degree abusive. It just wasn't like he was abusive to Shelley Duvall because he hated her.
He was abusive to everyone.
He was abusive to everyone. He was making everybody work 13-hour days. And it could go longer, it could go shorter, but that was about
the reality is that like the shooting environment was not especially bad.
56 weeks. It shot for over a year, and that was partially because the set got destroyed halfway through shooting, and they had to reshoot everything. But
some of the sets got burned down.
That doesn't change the fact, like that might not be Stanley Kubrick's fault, but that doesn't change the fact that people had to work 13-hour days for
over a year straight.
And it's not a year straight.
They had a break for holidays and stuff like that.
And they had to rebuild the set, and there was like a break for that. But still, like for your main job to be a 13-hour, like 6-day-a-week job for a year. Oh my God.
It's exhausting. It's exhausting.
That's a nightmare. I could not do that. I
just
couldn't show up to anywhere for that long. I would fall asleep halfway through.
No, dude. The amount of cancer everyone got from just chain smoking, because like we've all worked on sets before. What is the thing everyone does, even on student film sets? Fucking chain smoke. I could not imagine 56 13-hour days, especially in 1978. Bro, this movie came out in 1980. That means they probably shot it in 78. Mm-hmm. My God. My God, did they all have turbo cancer by the end of it? Yeah, so I mean, like, so now that that's out of the way, that's it. That was very important to bring up because that's like the thing that looms over this movie. And I hate it too. And all the mythologizing around this movie and Kubrick and his process is, I think, a cancer. In film classes.
One of the best things about it, because I've been a big Dr. Sleep hater for years. I hated that movie when it was like when I saw the trailer and I saw that they were using the aesthetics from The Shining. I was like,
I'm dressed as Jack Torrance from Dr. Sleep, not Jack Torrance from The Shining.
No, I was a big Dr.
Excuse me? Excuse me?
I have mysteries in this jacket.
Oh my God. All right, go ahead.
I was a big Dr. Sleep hater, but then I read a quote from Stanley Kubrick, and this is what kind of woke me up and had me like researching Shelley Duvall and researching Stanley Kubrick and how he behaved with most of the people. And he was a mean guy. He was absolutely mean guy, especially at work, but apparently he was very nice outside of that. But like one of the things that really woke me up to this, the real moment was I was reading, because I was interested in watching 2010. I still haven't watched it, but I was interested in it, and I was reading a quote from the guy who directed it, and he said he like was in contact with Stanley Kubrick while he was making it, and he was like, "Hey, I want your permission to make this movie. Like, I'm not going to make it unless you give me your blessing." And he was like, "Okay, fine. Like, yeah, you got it. Sure, do it." And then like halfway through like the production process of making the movie, he went back to Stanley Kubrick and he was like, "I'm really worried that I'm not going to live up to you. Like, I'm really worried that I'm not doing this right. Like, it's not like a fitting like follow up to to your film." And he was like, "Dude, don't worry about my film. My film doesn't exist to you. Make your movie, make it how you want to make it, and it'll be good, and people will like it. And it's as simple as that." And it was just like, Stanley Kubrick didn't care that a guy was making a sequel to his movie. A guy could make a sequel to The Shining the year after the movie came out, and he would have
wouldn't have cared. Yeah,
he would have said that has nothing to do with my
film. He doesn't hold
film.
his own films into this like.
Well, he it's like the film is the film.
It's
There's
the film.
nothing else.
Any kind of attempt to make a sequel or like homage it to him, it's like it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's just
like,
another film.
Do
and
your thing.
That kind of also softened me up on Ready Player One a little bit.
And it helps that Spielberg was his like close friend.
Made me angrier when it came out.
Oh, see,
because it was like is your friend, you bastard. How could you do this to him?
But it's, I don't know. Like, and I think like the mythologizing, as I said, of Kubrick is really just a cancer to film students and like filmmakers. Because like a lot of people, when we learned about auteur theory and we're taught about it, one of the people who comes to mind and one of the people we're taught about is Kubrick. And because he's like, the mythologized version of him fits the exaggerated idea of auteurism, where it's like he has full control over every little single aspect. Everything is under his purview, and he makes a complete masterpiece exactly to his design. His machinations are not questioned. You know what I mean? And it's like what that creates on a film set is a fucking tyrant dickhole who is too big for his fucking britches, who is living up to an ideal that Kubrick would have laughed at. Because when Kubrick was asked about, every frame of painting, as you have said, and everyone has said about your movies, so like everything is meticulously thought out and exactly perfect. Like everything is planned to the exact detail. Everyone talks about all these stories about this about you. And he said in this interview, he was like, yeah, I hate that. That's not true. If I planned everything out, my movies would be bad, because what makes a film, what truly makes a work of art, is other people's influence and problem solving on set and little bits of random improvised inspiration that comes out of nowhere and by accident. And it's like that spontaneity that you can't capture. It's like, it's literally if you follow his career, it is the first fucking lesson he learned. And everyone teaches it wrong. They go, he was a photographer and he faked all of his photos because he hated that it wasn't perfect. And then that's why he stopped being a photographer. And so that's why he went to making movies, because he make it all to his design. Wrong. He did hate being a photographer because he couldn't control everything perfectly. But the lesson he learned from it is that's the beauty of photography.
Yeah.
Is that you can plan it all out as much as you want. But if you look at the great photographers, it just happens.
And he's a really interesting guy. And I mean, he really did, like, I feel like he is sort of the greatest American filmmaker alive.
He's the great American auteur.
Not alive,
yeah,
he's dead.
Dead as shit.
Greatest American filmmaker to live, at least contemporarily. Like he makes things that, like, I've shown The Shining to people, I've shown Clockwork Orange to people, I've shown pretty much any of his movies to somebody and preface them like, hey, this movie's old, it's a little slow, and you know, there's some really controversial imagery in the movie.
Yeah.
And every single time afterwards, like, they're like, oh no, that was amazing, I loved it, and I don't really, it had that shit in it, and that was the case, but it was all to the service of the film. And I think that, like, and that's the thing you really need to pay attention to with Kubrick, and why he was a clever guy, is not so much like the everything, like the final product necessarily, but like the pacing of the shots, the pacing of the story.
Yeah.
Like these simple things that he was directing over the guidance of the whole production shoot. And it's just like, this stuff is masterful, and he brings it to every single film he works on.
So the director, when you talk about auteur is very related to like camera stilio. Camera stilio, the camera is a pen. The idea that person, then the auteur, they are like the author writing their story with the camera. And like that is how the terms come into play, and that's how they're originally. But I think that's not actually a good analogy for what a good auteur is, because that's not what Kubrick was. That's not what he did. What he was the conductor.
Yeah.
A good auteur director is a conductor. Yes, you can get a bunch of trained musicians, classically trained musicians, get them together, and you give them an amazing like piece of music, and you set them down, and you all give it to them, and you count them off, and they can just do it. They could just straight up do it, and it would probably be pretty decent. But if you want it to be amazing, you need a great conductor who knows that piece of music to his core. Yeah. And he knows exactly how everyone needs to play together, and he trusts them to do it, but they just need that little nudge, and he has the overarching idea of what it's going to be like. And that's what an auteur is to me.
I don't know. This is so off topic. I don't know why this made me think of this, but I saw a clickbait article that was framing this as a big deal. But they hired the cellist who played the Wonder Woman theme in Batman v Superman. Who also did it in the first Wonder Woman movie. They've rehired her to do something in the soundtrack for the Flash movie, and this is framed as like, they hired this cellist. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I feel like cellists get hired all the time.
Yeah, I don't know.
I feel like they don't just play one piece of music over and over again.
All right, you were going to say something?
Oh, I honestly don't remember. I lost it.
Yeah, you know, so
But,
like,
I don't know. We could kind of just move on to the actual movie.
yeah, let's go and move on to the actual.
Well, we could probably bring this up during Eyes Wide Shut, but the CIA murdered Stanley Kubrick.
Oh yeah, no, that's true. He's the cancer gun.
We
He
can't talk.
exposed the pedophile culture.
Hey,
We can't talk about that here.
Shh, everyone, shut the fuck
No.
up. We can't talk about this.
But it is relevant. It's so minutely relevant to this because you get the bear sucking off the dude in the tuxedo.
True.
And that's a thing.
The Soviets are
No.
in bed with the CIA.
No. It's the idea of secret societies who meet up and dress in animal costumes to not only have sex, and I'm not talking about furries.
Bohemian Grove. Bohemian Grove is what we're talking about here.
Yeah. Not talking about.
Let me tell you something. Let me tell you, Freedom Warriors. The elites, the global elites, are out there and they're getting together. They're dressing as bears and sucking each other off in Colorado.
This is a long running thing. This has shown up in movies before. This has shown up in books. This has shown up in a lot of stuff. And is it true? Who knows? Some people will want you to think it's very true, and some people want you to really think that certain people are really in this cabal. And there are factually people who are in this cabal because it does exist. We just have the evidence of it existing. There's no need to dance around that anymore. But yeah, that is an element in this movie a little bit too of putting that sort of like unprocessable horror.
Yeah.
Just like that feeling of the audacious of like there is something so dark and twisted in this world.
Yeah.
If you knew about it, you would kill yourself.
Yeah, and it's so like it kind of plays. This movie has some really interesting ideas with its horror that is part of why I personally don't tell people this is a horror film or I dissuade them from the idea that it is. I know that David disagrees with me. I think you disagree with me. Jesse might disagree with me as well. I think of it more as a paranormal thriller. I try to kind of pitch it more as like a drama, like an artistic drama that has horror elements, because it certainly has horror elements. Don't get me wrong. There are horrific things in it. There are horrific imagery, but it is not in any way a traditional horror movie. And
it's kind of in a similar way that you would pitch 2001: Space Odyssey to someone. You don't want to pitch it as just sci-fi because people might think it's like Star Wars or Star Trek, and it's the furthest thing from either of those things.
But I don't know. I absolutely have a different take on this. Mm-hmm. So you look at standard genre and how genre functions in social conversation, and I agree with you. If I was just talking to a stranger or somebody I didn't know very well, I wouldn't say that The Shining is like a good horror movie if they were like, hey, I just watched Ouija 2 and I really liked it. Do you have another good horror movie for me to watch? And I could be like, well, my favorite movie is The Shining. It's really scary. And then they'll watch it and they'll be like, you're weird. So, it's easy to be like, but if somebody says, oh, I like Hereditary, you could be like, oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, because it is a horror. Don't get me wrong, it is a horror film. But in any way I'd practically pitch it to someone, especially for tempering expectations is the biggest thing. Most people I know, because I literally, before the podcast, we didn't all watch it together. I watched it on Discord with 3 friends who had never seen it before, and the way I explained it to them beforehand, because they had these ideas of what The Shining would be. One of them was like, "Isn't that the like really scary one where it's like a guy going around killing people with an axe?" I'm like, "Get all of this out of your head."
Yeah, it's not.
I was like, "Get all of this out of your head." It is not. That's why I said it's not a horror film, because I could go in the nuance, but I'm like, it's not a horror film.
Right.
Don't look at it that way. People will tell you it's the scariest film they've ever seen, and while that might be true when you talk about the themes, it's not what people consider horror movies scary. It's a different kind of fear.
Well,
and so I'm like, don't look at it that way.
Like I had so many nightmares last night, if I'm being honest. And I do every single time I watch The Shining. And I just have so much existential dread and fear. And this is like, it's not a pleasant movie to get through or think about.
No, yeah.
Like from the beginning scene of just her talking to the CPS lady with the cigarette, and it keeps becoming ash. I was watching that scene. I was fucking chewing my fingers off. I was like, this is the most tense thing I've seen in my life.
Yeah, and it's just like, and part of it is just like you kind of waiting on shit. And it's like, it can get a little boring at times, but it keeps sucking you in because they're bored. That's why they're going crazy.
That's the point, yeah. It brings you down to their level.
The actors are bored. They've done this take 100 times already. Like, everything about this is made in such a way to really get you. And
I think one of the elements that's horrific about it visually, that isn't as much to us now, because it really, you have to put it, a lot of times when you watch a movie, you do have to think about the context in which it came out, right? One of the things that makes this movie horrific in 1980, but not now, is the fact that it was shot on a Steadicam for so many shots. And now we're so used to Steadicams to give
It was like the sixth.
Yeah, the cinematographer for the movie had invented the Steadicam. It was used a few times before.
Yeah, it was Rocky.
Yeah, but it had never been used to this extent. To the point that for like 10 years when this movie came out, people thought that like in order to do the tracking shot where Danny's on the big wheel, people thought there was like a suspended from the ceiling like dolly tracks. And that's not, it's just a Steadicam. To us, that's normal. And we're used to drones, Steadicams, we're used to gimbals. That's simple. But back then, it's fucking unnerving how smooth the camera moves for so long. And there's no idea where tracks would be.
Right.
It's moving in ways it shouldn't move. And so it's horrific in that way.
It feels like a ghost. It's almost like a horror film for
it's almost like exactly. Yeah.
But when I like, it is truly horror in its essence. Like, it is horror in the same way a novel is horror. And in the way like a great novel makes you, like Edgar Allan Poe, just like chills you to your bone.
Makes you sit there and think.
Yeah.
And the thinking is what gets you.
Makes you turn on the lights when you go down the hallway.
2001, you wouldn't want to call it sci-fi because somebody might think it's like Star Wars, but I think, and that is true, and that is how I would do it as well, but I fucking hate it because Star Wars isn't sci-fi. Science Wars
fantasy.
Is fucking fantasy.
Yeah.
And you can throw the science out of it. It's just fucking fantasy. Yeah. You don't know how any of the spaceships work. It could all be magic.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But 2001 is absolutely sci-fi.
Well, I wouldn't agree with the statement of not calling 2001 sci-fi because I come from the background of like loving like Isaac Asimov and Philip K. Dick and all that. But so it's like
of people these days say I like sci-fi and they mean Jurassic World falling.
Yeah. But like for me, when I think sci-fi, I think that. But like yes, but I still think it's different than calling. I think calling 2001: Space Odyssey sci-fi and calling The Shining horror are still two different things because there's still, I would argue, a little bit more separation with The Shining on that. But okay, let's look at it this way. It does not. One conforms more to genre expectations than the other one does.
Okay.
In all, like, no matter what you say about like it being deeply philosophical and yada 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 about 2001, that is the part of sci-fi, is that it's supposed to be philosophical.
Right.
Yeah. But like horror, the genre itself, the expectations are not that.
Yeah.
For The Shining.
Well,
it is a horror. Don't get me wrong.
I would say that those are more of the expectations of horror now, but that's because of The Shining a little bit.
And
and before, but like at the time for horror.
Yeah. This gets into something that'll just dance around real quick. There's like the Shining doesn't, like, it does have a philosophical sense to it, but it's more of like people who say, oh, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. Like, it's not specific about the philosophy.
But we can talk about this real quick because I said earlier what the movie is, and it's about a million things. Don't get me wrong. There are a lot of things you can read into it, but I think that the most surface thing to read into it is mental illness, cycle of abuse, yada yada. And I think this is why I get so annoyed when people say, I don't know what The Shining's about. It's like, did you get too bored and stop paying attention? Because they state it multiple times. When Scatman Carruthers is explaining what the shine is, and he's explaining the Overlook, Danny goes, oh, well, is the Overlook evil? Like, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, well, I wouldn't say that. He goes, there's something off about this place, don't you think? And he goes, a lot of people have the shine like you and me, and people don't have the shine like your mom or your dad. Places are a lot like that. Some places are normal, and other places got the shine to them. And what is it? It's like it's. Let me break it down to you even more. It's like if you've ever burned toast, and you clean up the toast, and you put it away, and you throw away the toast, but you still smell the burnt toast smell for the next few days afterwards. It's the same thing. And that literally is like saying like trauma, like left behind trauma. Yeah. Like it's in the walls, you know?
This is why it's my favorite movie, is because you make a very compelling case for this. Yeah. And I in a lot of ways, I want to agree with you that this is the most surface level, like this is generally what the movie's about. But I think you can honestly extrapolate it down, or I guess maybe wider to something more general, which is alcoholism.
No, well, it's cycle abuse, trauma, and alcoholism. It's that's all together in one unit.
And it is together, but it's like, is it about alcoholism and how it creates the cycle of abuse? Or is it about or how it feeds into it? Or is it about the cycle of abuse and
feeding
how
into alcoholism and whatnot? Yeah.
One thing I always I kind of realized watching it this time, or the most recent time I watched it, was how. So we talked very briefly about the differences between the novel and the film, and Stephen King, why he exactly didn't like it. You mentioned earlier how it was he considers The Shining to be a very personal story.
Yeah.
Like Misery is another one of his most personal stories.
Him confronting his alcoholism and his cycle of abuse.
And Stanley Kubrick kind of spat in that.
Yeah. But what I never really got until this time was how Stephen King used The Shining to kind of exorcise his demons. Stanley Kubrick also kind of did that with The Shining as well. Like he doesn't really identify much with like the alcohol or the abuse, because from all accounts, Stanley Kubrick was extremely straight edge, never really did drugs, never really drank. It seems like his vice was more kind of pseudo gambling, because he was really into football and stuff. But his big thing was chess. He was a huge chess nerd, and so that was his thing. But that was mostly his vice, I guess. I would say.
Nerd.
Yeah.
But
but he also
put a vibrator up your ass.
As we briefly talked about earlier, his sort of infamous reputation of being really abusive on the sets of his movies. And I think he's using The Shining as a kind of a way.
Well, and that's part of why it's a universal experience, because like Jack Torrance, it's no question why he's also an artist, why he'd be drawn to the fact that he's an artist who's abusive and also goes fucking crazy trying to make the perfect thing, and he's like banging away at a fucking typewriter.
I am the proudest fucking grandpa right now, because I was about to make that universal experience connection. It's like, yes, he liked the fucking book for a reason. He related to Stephen King, and he related to Stephen King's plight.
Not because of the alcoholism, but because of the art, the obsessed artist.
Yes.
Destructive.
But I think the way that Stanley Kubrick looked at it more is, I am not the one to be forgiven. Like that is not what this is about. This is more about how I affected other people, because I will die and then it will be their
which it creates an interesting meta narrative unintentionally,
because that's
with
the
real
mythology.
And the mythology behind the movie being that he was this abusive, like whip cracking monster to create this beautiful piece of art. It's almost perfect that that's the myth surrounding the story, that for him was exorcising the demon about the idea that he kind of abused people to make the art that he liked making. It's not exactly true, but it's also not wrong.
It makes you wonder just a little bit that if he decided to adapt the book more closely, and I don't think he would have. I think if he got to the point where he was like, I'm going to have Jack appear as a ghost at the end and Danny forgive him, I think at that point he would have been like, I'm not making this fucking movie. Why would I do this?
I think it also would have been too outright paranormal to him.
Right, yeah. But I think that had he been in a place where he was like, well, that's the story I want to tell, I want to make it so that way Danny forgives the ghost at the end, the shoot probably wouldn't have been as bad. Like, it wouldn't have been as long. They wouldn't have demanded as many takes.
No.
But like, he was in this mindset of, I'm going to make a horror movie. It's going to be, it's going to suck. It's going to fucking suck.
Because the important thing too is like the version of the book ends with a catharsis. The version of the movie ends with no catharsis. It ends as horrifically as it can, which is nothing really good happens. Fucking Jack dies, and now he is that burnt toast smell in the Overlook.
No. It ends even more horrifically. Than just Jack dying, and much more horrifically than Jack being forgiven, because it's like, it's this idea which is brought up in The Caretaker with, a sort of simulation of degradation and
it's, for people who don't know, it is a album that is about how many hours?
Like 6 hours.
6 hour long album that takes jazz songs from The Shining as well as other jazz like what is it called, classics, whatever, and it degrades them over time in order to simulate what it's like to go through dementia. Each section of the album, each song is named after the different I think 20 stages of dementia that there are. So yeah.
Yeah. And it's absolutely horrific to listen to.
Like, the most existentially horrifying thing I can ever
imagine.
imagine.
It's very horrifying. It can be like sort of calming and soothing at a point, but you have to get so far into it, and it's very maddening up to that point. But the ending is sort of like that dead reflection of like, I'm going to die, my mind is going to decay, I'm not going to be forgiven, I'm going to be lost in the memories of all of this shit in all of time, and I'm just going to fade away into the background somewhere. And I'm just going to be a picture that somebody sees on a wall, and maybe a ghost that they see sometimes. And it's like, there's so many different reads. And I love the idea that the Overlook Hotel is sort of an interdimensional thing where you can time travel and go back in time and merge with like this non-time thing. But it really gets down to that. It gets down to Stanley Kubrick's fear that he's going to get lost in the chaos of his own life when he dies.
And that he'll just be a memory and a collection of stories and then eventually nothing. And, it's something that personally is very existentially horrifying to me. I told you guys my greatest nightmare I've had that was recurring for a while. I've talked about how my grandma died of Alzheimer's and everything. It's a thing that runs in my family, and it's a thing that scares me to my core. But what's very interesting is I have a buddy, Charles. He is big man, and he does odd jobs. And one of the odd jobs he does is that there is a lady who does estate sales. If you don't know what an estate sale is, it's when an old person dies and they need to sell off all of their stuff. The family just doesn't want it anymore, so they just need to sell it off for money to pay for the funeral or whatever. Just to have money.
They keep the family.
They keep
the important stuff sometimes.
And that's the interesting thing. And this is one of the things that happened sometime after my grandmother died. That this relates heavily to The Shining, by the way, like unironically, especially with what you just said. I went over because he was like, "Hey, Randy, come over. There's some free stuff you can come take." One of them is a VHS camera that I have. There's some home movies on it. It's a guy who owns a local restaurant in town. His wife had died, and he had died years before. I took some of his stuff because I was like, "Sure, it's getting thrown out. If this is stuff that's not getting sold, this is getting thrown out." So I was like, "I'll take it." But in the stuff, this is the most psychotic thing that this man has ever said to me, but it's also one of the sweetest, most human things he has ever said. And it sticks with me. He hands me this big manila envelope. Like, it's massive. And I open it. He goes, "Yeah, look through that." And it's just a collection of letters. It's love letters between the two of them when they weren't together, like when they weren't like together yet, or they're getting together. And then I think he was like on a business trip or something, love letters from that. And it's letters between them and family. We're connecting through the years. And it's just all this like years of correspondence and their thoughts and all these interpersonal web of relationships. And as soon as I got done reading through it, he threw it in the trash because the family didn't want it. And I was like, "That's fucked up." And he goes, "Yeah." And I'm like, "That is existentially horrifying to read through." And he goes, "That's why I read it." I'm like, "Why? What do you mean?" He goes, "Family doesn't want to remember it. I think someone should remember it because this is more than all of the stuff in their lives that the family is going to keep. This is really what they were, and this is the real memory of them that deserves to persist in some way." And it's represented in The Shining in a way. And I'm going to bring it back right now. You were saying the picture on the wall. Mm-hmm. He's like, maybe he's just a memory that fades away, or like he's the trauma left behind in Danny and Wendy.
Maybe he time traveled back in time.
Yeah, ooh! But it's like, in a very real way, I think Jack, it's an unfortunate thing that Jack will be remembered by Wendy and Danny as the monster in the end. Mm-hmm. Instead, what about the man before? The man who he was most of his life. Similar to when my grandmother died, I made a conscious effort, and I talked to my mother about it a lot, especially when we were going through things after she had passed. I asked as many questions as I could, and I tried to do all that as I could, because for the couple years before her death, we were taking care of her, and she was in a horrible state. She had Alzheimer's, a very late stage. She ended up dying of it. Horrific, horrifying. She was nowhere like the woman that she was her entire life, and most people, unfortunately, remember people as that.
Yeah.
As they are in the end.
Right.
And that's the real horror.
And Stanley Kubrick, always thinking ahead. I think he kind of took a step ahead of that with, The Shining specifically. And he might have figured out that ending that he wanted beforehand. He might have figured it out in the middle of the shoot, but I think he kind of set up Jack, and he films Jack in such a way, because I watched it with my girlfriend, and she noticed out of this time before, which is unlike any other time she's watched it. Like, we got to the part before they even got to the Overlook Hotel, and she's like, he's a piece of shit. He's a horrible father. And he does that on purpose. Stanley Kubrick makes it like Jack seem bad from the beginning.
Yeah.
And I think that is to sort of step aside from that, exactly what you're saying.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
It's a shame that they saw him like that.
But he was always kind of and that goes into the like
right, and that's a big difference from the book.
Yeah, and Jack
like-
Torrance in the book is a lot more sympathetic.
Jack Torrance in the book is a straight up victim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a victim of circumstance. He has no real
which is why
agency.
Which is why I think Stephen King identifies very heavily with
Yeah,
that.
well, also in the book, like, because it's Stephen King and it's a part of his shared universe that he was building up into, like, for years, that would become the Dark Tower series. Well, I actually like the Dark Tower series, and I actually like the shared universe.
Oh my
However,
God, don't get me started
Yeah,
on
okay,
the
but-
heartbreak of that.
yeah, but yes, but I actually like that whole thing and the mythos of what The Shining is and The Shine and, like, all these different characters, and it's very interesting. But because all of that is behind it in his mind when he's making The Shining as a book, Jack Torrance is objectively possessed by interdimensional, like, demons
It's
who
pretty
are controlled by a dark overlord who seeks to destroy the Dark Tower.
Evil Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah. Meanwhile, you have the movie, which I think it's beautiful in that I think in the movie it makes it clear The Shine is real, but it's a very vague thing what The Shine is, and everything else is left as a question mark. What is real and what isn't? Is Jack actually, like, being possessed by the hotel, or is it just like an excuse?
Or is it just because of the severe isolation, the cabin fever is driving him crazy?
And it's like there's something about the hotel, but Danny brings up an amazing point. He repeats what Dick
Halloran.
I always
Jazz.
Dick Halloran says.
Also, that's the reason we have.
Scatman Crothers voiced Jazz in the Transformers.
Yeah, but Dick Halloran mentions to Danny, and Danny brings it up again. There's the famous scene with the twins in the hallway, and sees them chopped up, and he's horrified. But what does Tony say to him to calm him down? He's like, "It's not real. It's it can't hurt you. It's like pictures in a book."
Yeah.
And that's it. It's like it's not actually affecting you. It's scary to look at, but it's like as he said before, as Dick said when he was explaining the Overlook Hotel. There's nothing really scary about it. It's just like the place is just a place, and it's echoes of the past. Nothing is real there. It's just like that. And so it's like, does Jack maybe have the shine? Maybe, but is it used as an excuse for his break? Possibly, but was he just a monster who's going to break
I
anyways?
think he needs to go to the bathroom.
No, I don't need to go to the bathroom. I have something to say to this. So yeah, a lot of the paranormal stuff could easily be written off as this kid who's already been told about the Donner Party and shit was told about this horrible fucking incident that happened in the hotel, and in all the isolation, he sees it, he goes insane. Everything that they see could be, written off.
Well, no,
as,
that's
like,
not
them
what I'm
going
saying. I'm
crazy.
saying, like,
No.
Even in the film, it seems pretty apparent The Shining is real.
Yeah, no.
Because
The Shine is
he
real.
literally predicts things before it happens.
Yeah, no, that's like, well, that's what I'm gonna say is, like, a lot of the paranormal stuff can be explained, but the two things that can't: one, yes, the shine is real, and two, who lets Jack out of the freezer?
Yep. That's the biggest thing. Yeah.
Because that's the biggest thing. Because,
scary
like,
thing.
Wendy and Danny, obviously they wouldn't. She locked it, like, pretty fucking well, and he just gets out.
You want to talk about other subtly scary moments. I mean, when he goes into the bathroom and he asks the waiter what the waiter's name is, and the waiter tells him the name, and I forget what the name is.
Grady.
Yeah,
It's the guy who...
Delroy Grady. And he's like,
You're the caretaker.
And as soon as he says it, he turns in such a way. And Stanley Kubrick has it perfectly set up so that way, like, you won't remember who that guy is if you're watching this for the first time.
But he brings it up. He mentioned,
And then Jack brings it up, and then that's where you go, oh, this is creepy. But the way he shoots it is so that way, if you've rewatched it and you know what this guy's name is, and once he says his name, he shoots it in such a way that he turns up and he says his name, and then it's just like, holy shit! I almost fucking pissed my pants. I was just like, God damn, I know what happens in this movie, and this scared the fucking piss out of me. Because I can imagine being a guy in a location and going up to somebody and being like, hey, what's your name? And then he says the name of a guy that I just saw on the news was killed. And it's just like, I would fucking, I don't know what I would jump down a waterfall.
Yeah, it's fucking horrific. And the worst part is he goes, do you have a wife, Grady? Oh, yes, I do. Do you have kids? I've got 2 daughters that I love them so much.
Why is Grady British? I never understood that.
He's
like the only British guy in the movie.
But also, Shelley Duvall's from Texas, and she has a pretty clear Southern accent.
Yeah, she has a clear Texan accent.
And that's the thing, is there's a few other characters who have...
Scat McCrothers lives in Florida.
Yeah.
On the off season.
It's sort of like it doesn't make any sense why all these people are in this building together. But I'm really happy you brought up Tony and they're not real. You know, they can't really hurt you. Because it's also saying a thing about this movie. It's called The Shining. It is the concept that is described in the film. It is The Shining. It can't hurt you. It's just scary.
It's just scary.
It lets you tap into other people's minds.
Yeah, no, it's a great
see.
meta thing. But what's interesting too, you mentioned earlier, like, it's all nice to say that like it's just a picture, can't hurt you, which great. But you mentioned who the fuck let him out of the freezer. Yeah. The other question is who the fuck choked Danny?
Yeah,
because it's like if it is just pictures, it's it hurts you now. And I could get into the whole like. Well, if you were to ask Stephen King about how The Shining works and how The Shine works with people and locations that are like actually technically like portals into the interdimensional web and everything like that, well, there are certain locations within those locations that are more powerful to the other side, and so things that can manifest visually and mentally can manifest physically. So Room 3037 is they can manifest physically, and that's why she's able to physically interact with Jack, but also physically choke Danny. That's dumb and gay. Instead, I like how Kubrick does it, which is just make you question it all more.
Yeah.
Because even the thing that makes you feel safe of it's just pictures, it can't hurt you. It's just proven false a couple times.
But
he walked into a door.
Because did Jack do that or didn't he?
Yeah,
no, he walked into a door.
He walked into a door.
He walked into a fucking door. No, I mean, yeah. I still don't really know what the read is on that. Like, I part of me wants to say Jack did it and he just like blocked it out.
Well, and the other thing too is
it's left very ambiguous.
If Jack, the other thing too, it's like we know that like in the mythos that the film builds that
he wouldn't have necessarily blacked it out. He could have just lied about it.
But the thing
was lost in it by that point.
But the thing too that I was about to say is like the film does set up that there is some paranormal thing with the Shine and the hotel, and the hotel itself might have its own form of the Shine.
Doc.
But like so we see that Jack almost gets possessed a few times, basically. So who's to say that, yes, pictures can't hurt you, but Jack is almost like this fucking beacon, this weakness that the hotel gets into the mind of. Who's to say that Danny, who sees the reality, that only people with the Shine can see the reality of what's going on versus everyone else who doesn't see
the woman.
He sees the woman, but it was Jack actually choking it, but it was the woman doing it through Jack. And so that's another thing.
Here is the fucking, and it's just it's infinite, and this movie goes on infinitely, and you can go down these spirals.
It's an Ouroboros.
And it never fucking ends because you have once again the moment in the bathroom where he's like, "You were the groundskeeper here," and he's like, "No, you've always been the groundskeeper." So the idea that maybe Jack inspired that guy to chop up his family. But this guy inspired Jack to chop up his family.
Or maybe there's some greater, deep, dark spirit that is in him and him that is doing this every time.
But there is that idea that the Overlook is timeless.
Or,
and that which exists in the future exists in the past.
Past exists now. Or, even more interesting, to bring it back to the Native American spiritualism, it is built, they say, on a Native American burial ground. Who's to say there isn't some Native American guardian spirit that has always been the caretaker of this burial ground that inhabits people and then kills them to clear it out?
I'm going to blow everybody's mind.
Go ahead.
Native American burial ground. What's a common folk creature seen in Native American folklore?
Wendigo.
The Wendigo?
Skinwalker.
Yeah.
What is a skinwalker? A witch who wears the skin of an animal or a person to appear as them. What do we see in this fucking movie? A man in a bear suit. A man in a fucking bear suit.
You know, I was actually with you up until that.
No.
But like, yeah.
But old lady possessing Jack Nicholson. Same fucking
It's the same concept. No, I get you. No, it's a funny way to put it. But yes, I know why you did that. It's funny, but
No.
Yeah, no, it's there's a million ways you can read this fucking movie, and they're all so
schizophrenic. They're all make you a schizophrenic.
They all make it, which is what I mean. Maybe Jack's a schizophrenic. You know.
You know what I just realized, and I guess it's not necessary, but we have been talking for this movie almost the entire allotted time, and I don't even think we've like summarized the plot or anything like that.
Well, we don't
I know,
need
yeah,
to.
we don't have to because it's The Shining.
Well, also
but-
to be fair, the point of this podcast is you better have fucking watched the movie before. Yeah. The point is that it's a companion piece, not a replacement.
This could go on for 6
hours. If you want to
Yeah.
basically watch a movie and know what we're talking about, watch our commentary videos on YouTube. They're pretty good. We just put one out about Doom. You should go check that one out if you haven't yet.
Yeah, no, the commentary for The Shining would just be us in complete silence, and then when it gets
Yeah.
to the first scene of the naked lady, I'd be like, "Huh."
We wouldn't want to do a commentary for The Shining, but like the gimmick of like the 24-hour live stream, the idea of like setting yourself to for 24 hours straight, we are going to talk about The Shining. You would get to insane, like it would become Room 237. You would be like, okay, the moon landing was faked, and there is absolutely.
I gotta say, I'm gonna be honest. I do love the idea of a 24-hour live stream of us just like ranting about some, like The Shining would probably be the perfect movie to do, and I think. I've got a whiteboard that's over there.
Oh, shit.
If we like rented a cabin for a weekend and we just streamed from a cabin, because like, yeah, we could do it in my basement.
We should do
like,
Batman v Superman.
Oh my God. But we could do it in the basement, right? But like, we're not really isolated. We can leave anytime. We can get fucking Uber Eats or whatever. But if we're like streaming in a cabin, we can't fucking leave. We're in the cabin. We are isolated in Red River Gorge. Ain't nothing out there. That would be awesome. I think that would be hilarious.
If we get a cabin, I'm bringing drugs.
I think we would kill each other. I think that would just be a thing that happened.
Why would you say
because
that?
of the drugs. But also,
why would you say that?
Would help.
I don't think I would kill anyone. I'm not going to hurt you. You didn't let me finish, David. I'm going to bash your fucking brains in. No,
That's not dulled, by the way, ladies and gentlemen.
this is an axe I use to chop wood.
Axe.
Every winter I chop wood with this axe. It's not a joke. I do that because my parents' house it has no heater. They have 2 fireplaces.
Oh.
So they just heat their house
shit.
with firewood. So I have to go chop firewood regularly.
I didn't know that. That's
That's what I do while you guys are at work during the winter. It's not a joke. I chop firewood.
I love the way you phrase that. Like we're a medieval like people living in a house.
Well,
Like,
I mean,
this is what I do while you work for the winter.
to be fair, we have a heater here.
We do have a heater.
My
here.
parents don't.
I
do.
wish we had a fireplace. It'd be sick as fuck.
Okay, so there is something in this movie. We mentioned it earlier with 237, and I this time around I thought about it, and it's just the biggest joke to me, which is the idea that it's him admitting that he faked the moon landing.
That theory is probably my favorite one.
Well, okay, yes, we can talk all day about but the reason why I love it is because realistically, yes, there is a reason he put Danny in the Apollo 11 sweater. And it's because he knows people think he faked the moon landing, and it's just Stanley Kubrick being funny.
I think it's an inside joke.
I think it's just him being funny. I just think it's a joke. I think that's all it is. I don't think it's anything grander. As far as like, oh well, the pattern of the carpet is, it looks like the landing pad. No.
Also, he used room 237, which in the book it was 217. Why did he change it? Oh, because the distance in miles between the Earth and Moon is 237,000 miles. That is him admitting that he helped fake the moon landing.
First of all, no, the fuck it ain't.
And the moon is a giant.
Let
me tell you, what was it? And the moon's actually a giant egg that the reptilians hatch out of, and they go to become prominent members of the liberal ruling class.
Jack Torrance's whole arc in this movie is about him getting frustrated by his nagging wife in this movie, right? And he's just trying to work. It's a metaphor for how his nagging wife kept bothering him about, hey, Stanley, stop faking the moon landing.
Oh my fucking god!
The moon's made of cheese.
I saw a thing. It was a little meme. And it was like at first it shook me and it went, "Oh my god, he did fake the moon landing." It was like it showed the footprint of the astronaut's boot on Mars on the moon, and then it showed like a picture of like fucking whatever the fuck his name was, Billy Armstrong.
Billy Armstrong, the lead singer from Green Day.
Yeah, Billy Armstrong. It showed a picture of his boot, and it was like it just wasn't at all similar. And then I was like, "Oh my god, it did fake the moon landing." And then I saw in the first comment, it was like, "Yeah, no, they left the boots on Mars. They were wearing a boot inside of a boot, and they left the outer boot on Mars because it had
The moon.
It had Mars dust on it.
Moon dust.
No, it had Mars dust from." Because
They actually went. So they faked the moon landing because they actually went to Mars.
They actually went to Mars.
They actually went to Mars. Don't let them lie to you.
The billionaires couldn't let us know.
They couldn't let us know that they were that close.
And this is why the Suicide Squad is based. You can say it's based for whatever stupid reason you imagine.
Don't
but
listen to the lies of big sobriety.
The reason James Gunn is based is because in the movie The Suicide Squad, he said, "Fuck NASA. NASA is evil. NASA is the fucking
Fuck
devil.
NASA. All my homies
And
hate NASA.
Is the devil. We hate all American forms of government, but there's still a big subsect of nerds that are like, but we love space. What have we gotten from there? Nothing. Shit. It's all bullshit. I hope we fake the moon landing because that would be a better fucking use of money than actually going to the moon and getting nothing.
My favorite part of the moon landing is you see them on the moon waving and you look up in the sky and you see the moon. That's so cool. I love that.
Okay, back to The Shining because we should talk more about The Shining because there's a million things to talk about, and I think we've got time left, and I think we should just keep
The Shining
rolling on.
The Shining is actually about how the Earth is flat.
Okay.
No, hold on. Hear me out.
Hear me out.
Okay. So he goes to a hotel. How many letters is in the word hotel?
I'm gonna stab you in the face.
7.
No,
Exactly.
what? 5.
How many letters does Earth have?
5.
Checkmate.
Okay. All right. No.
Just saying. Dude, watch the movie again and you'll see it.
I really like the Simpsons parody of this movie.
The Shining.
I think that actually
get
is a
sued?
pretty good. What's the most insane original take on The Shining that you can muster up?
Well, we'll do that, but before we do that, can I ask one other question?
Yeah.
If we were all isolated in a hotel or a cabin in a snowstorm, live streamed for an extended period of time, which one of us would snap and kill the others?
Well, I would be solving the murder afterwards because I'm in the trench coat, so it wouldn't be me doing it because I would be solving.
I feel like you would be you're the red herring, and it would actually be me.
I would definitely kill one of you.
Yeah, no, this is a Joss Whedon movie. They set you up the entire time to be it,
And then he has
at
an
the last
affair-
minute, they pull the rug out.
Then he cheats on his wife,
His pregnant wife.
Yeah.
and he goes, "I have an Asian fetish."
I think
And
gaslights
also
her.
a foot fetish. Yeah, I love feet.
Okay, so back to what you were saying. Now that we took our aside with that, what were you saying? One more time.
All right. Well, let's say hypothetically we were in a 24-hour snowstorm live stream in a cabin, and we all pulled our penises out. Who would get erect the fastest? And I mean, who would it look most appealing on screen for?
I have a visually distinct penis.
I don't think this is the question I asked before.
No, it isn't. But I will say my libido is the strongest. I would guarantee, and I would, as we've discussed last episode. I would get hard the fastest.
I don't know. I'm like the fucking Hulk roller coaster at Universal Studios. I go to 0 to 60 in 4 seconds. Like
I stay hard. And
I'm hard right now. I haven't stopped being hard since I was 12 years old.
Now I will say the only thing going against me is they do have a brown penis.
Today,
it's not pink like your guys's. Mine is brown.
Jacob allows us to lead into our sponsorship today, which is Universal Studios.
Universal Studios.
You know what's funny?
It's horror week.
The funny thing is, and I don't know if anybody else can relate to this, but I'm white, but I also have a brown penis.
You have a brown penis as well.
No, I would say the color of it, like if looking at it objectively, it's
from a
clearly,
certain angle.
It's darker than the rest of my body for sure. I would say that it's closer to brown than pink.
Let me check real quick.
Okay, don't.
No, it's yeah. Okay, so I wouldn't say it's brown outright, but it is definitely darker than.
I don't
the
like
other
these
parts
white
of my
boys
body.
claiming to have brown penises.
No.
I can prove it.
No. I'm not saying I have a brown penis the same way that you're saying you have a brown penis. I'm saying I have a browner penis than like
Your
my
average.
leg.
Yeah.
It's browner than my leg.
Okay.
For
now,
sure.
to answer your
I'm-
other
I'm-
question, go ahead.
I'm just a Ken doll.
I just
down
want to
there.
say it's not.
Okay.
It's not.
That's
pink.
how all ace people are.
I want it to be clear that it's not pink down there.
Yeah.
It's not pink.
I don't even know what you guys are talking about.
To answer your other question, what would our crazy crackpot theories that you could realistically
Well, guys, you rudely cut me off before I could finish mine.
Earth is flat?
Yeah, The Shining is
Okay, go
actually
ahead.
about how the Earth is flat. Okay, how many letters are in a hotel? Five.
Five.
How many letters are on Earth?
Five.
Yeah.
Okay, so when Danny is going around the Overlook Hotel, right, and he goes in a he goes in a pattern that is it's a rectangle, but it's also kind of round.
Yeah.
And he's wearing an Apollo 11.
Okay.
So he's
no,
basically
no, and he's also going in like sort of odd patterns that might be meant to represent how the planes have to fly in order to fake that the Earth is round.
Yeah.
Like his little bike is mimicking the flight patterns, and that's Stanley Kubrick saying that the people in control of determining that the Earth is round instead of flat are children on big wheels. They're not adults who should be flying planes. They're
Exactly.
children in big wheels. And they have abusive
what-
dads who
and
are
what-
trying to kill them with axes.
And what happens to Jack Torrance at the end of the movie? He gets lost and freezes to death in the maze. The maze is a metaphor for escaping the matrix of thought that is the Earth is round. It's all
Yes.
bullshit. And if
Yes.
and the establishment will not let you escape from that line of thought, so they kill you if you think too much about it.
Right.
That's why they hit him with the heart
Okay,
attack.
I got-
And it
the
takes a
pedophile cabal.
machine. It takes a machine, and it takes snow, which represents cocaine. So you need to do cocaine, and then you need a machine that can kind of get you through cocaine while
this.
you're doing it, and then that will activate the thing in you that lets you see that gets
This is
rid of
all
the curvature of the
so
Earth.
fucking stupid. I can tell you what it's about.
Okay.
You ready to hear what it's about?
Yeah.
Marlon
I'm ready.
Brando.
Brandao?
Okay.
Shut up. Marlon Brando. Fuck you.
It's a different. It's a different.
I mean,
man.
it's a valid pronunciation. I just haven't heard it too much.
Marlon
Makes me think of
Brando.
Martin
No,
Landau.
Marlon Brando was supposed to play the maze.
No,
Okay,
no, no.
hold on.
Marlon
Everyone's jumping in on my interpretation. Let me outline it for you apes, okay? At the beginning of the movie, once they arrive at the Overlook Hotel, what is the first thing that is said about the Overlook Hotel? It's that it was built on a Native American burial ground, to which they talked about the history of killing Native Americans in order to accomplish that building of it. Okay, continue with that. What is the iconography of the lobby that Jack Torrance hangs out in the entire time? It's full of commercialized versions of Native American aesthetics. What does Jack Torrance say when he's drinking with Lloyd later? White man's burden. Famously, Marlon Brando was an advocate for Native American rights. However, he was also criticized for being kind of like liberal aestheticism to make him seem like he really cares about something where in reality he really doesn't give much of a shit. Okay? This is a clear comment on that. It's his white guilt, the white man's burden on that. Now, why is Jack Torrance, why is he Marlon Brando? Well, first off, this is a story about addiction. Marlon Brando was addicted to food.
That's true.
Booze and food are the same. Also, what is one of Marlon Brando's most famous roles?
On the waterfront?
Streetcar Named Desire. Close. And what character did he play in that? He played an alcoholic. A young, beautiful alcoholic. And he was also an artist who wasn't so concerned with what was written in front of him. He was just focused on giving the best performance possible because he didn't want to overwork himself trying to learn the lines. They got in the way. What does Jack write in screenplay format, but all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy over and over and over again, as if the words on the page do not matter to him. He's just trying to give the best performance.
Where does Last Tango in Paris fit into this?
It's when he rapes Danny.
Hold on. I think no. What you're saying makes a lot of sense, but I think I'm going to extrapolate a little bit, and I'm going to say maybe Stanley Kubrick was paying more close attention to Marlon Brando's past roles, and he was looking at his role in the movie that we've already talked about here on the podcast, Superman, and he was looking at his role as Superman's father. And he was like, okay, well, Danny is sort of the Superman in this situation. And we have Jack Torrance, who represents the sort of Jor-El. And I think he went back from that a little bit and he said, that's trite. People are going to recognize that and notice it. And so he started to talk with the parents of Danny Lloyd, and he started to talk with Jack Nicholson, and he started to say, all right, what do you have sort of in the purview of the kind of movies you want to do in the next few years? And he went to Danny Lloyd and he said, what do you really want to grow up to be? And he took this and he sort of created a more expansive story, because we look at Jack Torrance and we look at him as a character, and he starts off as a very normal, happy-go-lucky guy. He's sort of a reject from society, but it's okay. He writes these novels. He's trying to write a novel. He hasn't had incredible success with it. He needs to put himself in a reclusive position in order to find success. And it's a little sad, but it's understandable in a sense. And he has this wife that he loves, but he abuses. And he has this son who has this connection to something else. It's almost like he has two sides about him. And, there's all these things that are going on about the movie. And I think that as you see it, you see that yes, Jack Torrance at one point uses a baseball bat, but who uses the baseball bat first? Of course, it's Wendy.
Wendy, yes.
Yes, of course.
Of course.
Of course. And later on, you see Wendy using like a knife, but that's more of Jack's thing, is using sharp objects.
And Danny ends up using the knife too.
And I'm just saying, it almost seems like yes, you have the situations of Jack at the Gold Room with these old, sort of ghost-like people in the background in very inaccurate-looking clothing. It's almost like you could imagine that Jack Nicholson was wearing some kind of purple zoot suit in this scene, and he would fit completely in. And that's just kind of where your mind immediately goes. And so, you keep progressing from this in this angle, and you sort of understand that Jack has a sense of humor about him, and he's not a straightforward guy. He's a bit of a joker. He's a bit of a joker.
I'm losing my mind.
He even wears a red jacket in the film,
I'm losing
like we
my
see
mind.
in the film Joker from 2019.
I'm losing my mind.
And I'm just saying, he's in an abusive relationship where he is the abuser.
Oh my god!
I'm just saying
you are a bastard.
Jesse, do you have your theory?
Yeah, no, I think they shot all this shit in 6 weeks and made all that other shit up.
I
think they all just got everyone together and be like, all right, look, this isn't going to be that long because we're fucking professionals, but it'd be really fucking funny.
It'd be funny. That is.
They scammed the studio to pay them all for 56 weeks of shooting.
They just got fucked up in a hotel for like a year.
Dude, I think that like if they only filmed this in like 4 weeks and then they pretended to like do it over the course of 56 weeks instead, they could have like made a documentary about like this essential like weird like media heist of like money from the studio or whatever. They were really running off with that in that 4 weeks of time and pretending it's 56 weeks, soaking up all that money. You could make a documentary called 28 Days Later. It's about all the time after the shoot time in which they had to figure out what to do in that time.
What is this related to?
Oh, it's related to, I'm glad you asked. Next week's episode is 28 Days Later, directed by Danny Boyle. This is on Jacob's list. I'm a big Danny Boyle fanboy. I intentionally limited Danny Boyle on my list. I honestly could have put almost all of his movies because I love them all so much.
I put 2 of them.
I put 2 of them as well. I put Trainspotting and Steve Jobs. And I was like, I could put more, but I'll stop there.
It's very interesting you put Steve Jobs.
I think it's his magnum opus personally. But we'll get into that.
Okay.
But
okay, I'm eager to get to that one now.
But yeah, no. So 28 Days Later is an amazing film. If you've never seen it, it's kind of the birth of like fast zombies. Before Romero zombies kind of dominated everything, where like they're kind of these slow shambling things, which realistically, probably. But like I like the fast zombies as an edgy kid in middle schooler. I hated them because I was like, no, keep it original, because I'm a big Romero fanboy. But if I'm gonna be honest, 28 Days Later version of Fast Zombies is great. Not all Fast Zombies are good.
Yeah.
But the 28 Days Later is fucking horrific.
It also started the virus thing.
It started the virus thing. There was no such thing as a virus before.
This movie's the reason for Corona.
Yeah. Actually, it came out just last year in response to
It was
COVID.
more commonly Stardust that made zombies.
Yeah, that is actually true. Most commonly, it would be like Stardust or Voodoo that would create zombies. It is one of the ones that made it so it was like a
Stardust,
virus.
directed by Matthew Vaughn.
Shut the fuck up. I
weird.
hate you so much. But,
That's honestly exactly where my mind went.
Yeah, but the movie is available on HBO Max. So if you're watching it on streaming, go watch it there. You can rent it pretty much everywhere you can rent movies online. So definitely do so. It's really worth it. I think everyone should own this movie. I think everyone should watch this movie. It is fucking real good. Also, we'll talk about it during, but one of my favorite bands ever is Granddaddy. It's probably the first hipster band I ever really got into because I got into it as a kid. They're great. Amazing music. And there's an amazing sequence set to one of the songs, AM 180. Phenomenal. So we'll be getting into that movie next week. Now, time to get into the fucking plugs. So spread your ass cheeks and let me plug you real quick. Oh, that's right, baby. All right, so make sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the bell notifications so you can be notified whenever we post new videos. What videos do we post? Every week, we post new podcast episodes, usually. We also post YouTube shorts pretty regularly. We also started posting commentaries. We're going to post pretty regularly. The most recent one that we put out was our Doom 2005 commentary for Rocktober. We've yet to announce what our next commentary is. You'll just have to see it when it drops, baby. Make sure to, if you're an audio listener, check out this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Google Play Podcasts. Because yet again, our 3 Irish listeners really love us for some reason.
God bless them.
God bless you, Ireland.
What's up?
I love
How
you so
doing?
much.
Gorgo was the shit.
Gorgo was the shit. But yeah, that is all the plugs out of the way. I love you all so much. Thank you for being here. Good night.
I won't wipe my ass this week.